Just Fix It in Post is fueled by the donut. Very good. Where's the chocolate is really like my favorite. So, light and fluffy. Very good. The last day of every shoot, I always bring a box of these to set and let everybody have at them, and it kind of becomes like I don't say anything, I just drop it in like, either the video village or the video van or whatever. Sure. And then they go at them because it's usually after breakfast. Whether you're law enforcement doubling down on tradition, a multitasking parent seeking some sweet silence, or a producer looking for a morale boost on set, get The Donut. For the sweetest updates, you can follow them on Instagram at The Donut San Pedro. Located at 1615 South Daffy Street, 562-881-0656. Get The Donut. Serving San Pedro for the last 45 years. The Donut. Damn, that's good. Just Fix It in Post.
Okay, this is a career.
Things like creative directors and approach.
Wow.
Fucking A. I am absolutely there.
Clients wanting more for less.
Dude.
This mix of creativity and technology.
Tweet heard around the world. People were freaking out.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post. Industry insights straight from the source. I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome. He's a director, producer, and storyverse architect, crafting impactful narratives for brands like Mercedes-Benz, McDonald's, Toyota, and Paris Hilton's Electrify fragrance. He's a master of turning ambitious ideas into reality, a Platinum News Award winner for his innovative NFT film, Experience Life on Cloud 9. And when he's not shaping the future of storytelling, you might find him brainstorming his next big concept over late-night tacos. Please welcome Jonny Zeller. I'm so excited to have you out for a few reasons. One was like I feel like my big break, you were there when we were doing the Tundra thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this guy shows up, he's got his Audi with his like camera. And I was like, I'm doing the wrong thing. That was a good shoot. Yeah. How long ago was that? That was almost 10 years ago, maybe now. Oh, fuck. Yeah. God, it goes by so fast. So much has happened since then.
Yeah, right. Oh, boy.
Which is crazy because I see your stuff now and I see that it's so action-packed. There's a lot of like people flying, gunslinging, and then I see Visa, and then I see Paris Hilton, and I'm like, that's diverse. That's dynamic. What kind of work are you doing now?
I was thinking about this. I have thought a lot about it, and I'm not sure if it was a mistake or not. It doesn't really matter, I guess, at this point, but I've never really liked being put into a box. And we know in this industry, it's very easy to do. You're the car guy, or you're this person or that person. And so when I was doing a lot of car stuff and a lot of action sports, that was kind of my background, is high action, get it in 1 or 2 takes because you don't have the option, and figure out how to make $100,000 look like $1 million. And that was like the shtick. Do that for a while, and as a creative, you get bored and you say, I don't want to be the car guy or that. Really made a conscious effort to turn those kinds of jobs down and to go and try to do as many other things as possible. You find that when you try to swim against the grain, it's a heck of a lot harder than if you just go with the flow. So I spent a lot of years really trying to not do, anytime anybody said, oh, you have this kind of work, you should do this, I immediately would get turned off and say, I don't really want to do that. I want to do this. So the byproduct of that is a portfolio that's got quite the range. But the detriment is people don't see you as this thing. And so I lose bids because I'm not, hyper-focused in this or hyper-focused in that. So I don't know if it was the right choice to make or not, but it was the choice that I made. And I think through all of that, where I kind of came to was the through line of being the sense of scale and big story, and ideally one that kind of comes to life in many different platforms, not just like one thing. That's the long-winded way of saying, I think that a twist on reality and a sense of scale is kind of my specialty. And anytime we can do like multi-platform, build a big story world where the audience can get excited about migrating from platform to platform, not just seeing an ad on TV or pre-roll or something like that. So I love that sort of thing. We could probably nerd out about multi-platform storytelling for several hours, and but we'll save that for another time.
Is there a common ask when people come to you for projects?
International seems to be a big one. I have been fortunate to travel the world 10 times over shooting. And when you're on the road, you're in a place oftentimes that I've never been before. And so you get there and it's like, okay, you're here. And now you have to figure it out. Do as much prep as you can, but things get wacky when you're in a different country and tensions can be high. And, the ability to travel well, still keep a good attitude, and still be able to produce something and pivot 1,000 times a day seems to have kind of caught on as like, oh, this is a person who can handle the shitstorm, throw them in. So the international stuff for sure, and then multi-platform, or when it has to be big. When unfortunately, sometimes it's, we don't have a lot of money, but we need it to feel big. And we say, okay, all right, well, we can, we'll figure it out.
How did you get into all this? Where did that kind of start for you?
Snowboarding and skateboarding. I was trying to become a pro snowboarder and broke a bunch of bones, ruptured my spleen, the whole deal. It kind of was like all of that downtime, I was behind the camera. And with my brother and all my friends growing up, we would all pass the camera around anyway. Then as I was getting more hurt because the jumps were getting too big and the rails were getting too long, I was editing the videos anyway. And so I really kind of got into it from that sense. And so just kind of carried that on and kept going.
So did you go to school for what you're doing?
I did. Well, I went to business school first for a couple of years because in the Midwest, the film industry is not, especially 15 years ago, wasn't really a thing outside of some commercials. So I did business school for 2 years and then went to Boulder and did film school there for 3 years.
And where'd you grow up?
Just outside of Minneapolis in the suburbs.
Okay.
Right on the Wisconsin border.
You and your brother are doing videos, and your brother's a DP, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And do you have the opportunity of working with him a lot on?
We just did. We haven't that often, but we just worked on one together. It was a ton of fun. We always had worked. I mean, in those old days, Mike never really thought about the industry. He was going a different path, but he always had a really good eye. And I felt like if I gave him the camera, I knew that we were most likely thinking the same thing. And he always had a good aesthetic and still does, obviously, but just a good sense of like what's cool and what looks right and just kind of an eye for it. And so it makes sense that he eventually, I drug him out to California and he fell in love with it. And so
you guys are making videos when you're younger. About when does it start to become a hobby and then kind of convert into being commercial?
I was trying to do, like what most people do. You get a real estate video or a wedding video. And I think those are good foundations because oftentimes you have to learn that you've got to get it right. You've got one shot. So prep. And I was doing a lot of editing at the time. And I think that if anytime somebody says, what should my kid do if they want to be a director, or somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about getting into filmmaking. So other than don't. Well, I start with, if you love anything else, do that instead. If you can't see yourself doing anything else, then go do it because it's hard and it's long and it will suck your soul. But the reward, if you can get there, is great. So otherwise, I say, if you want to be a director, go be an editor first. And you've heard that, I'm sure, before. Learn from other people's mistakes. And so did that. And then we had a Hail Mary pitch to Red Bull back in 2012, still living back in Minneapolis at the time. And we should not have won the contract, but somehow we did. And that was the big spark to move out to California and then just kind of snowballed from there.
So what were kind of some of the first projects you worked on? It was Red Bull, and then what else?
Red Bull, it was Toyota, a lot of car stuff at the time.
A lot of car stuff? And then how did you go from, because you were doing the car stuff and a lot of like the action sports stuff, how did that kind of transition into the action role play, POV, like I see some shooter, action stuff like that.
I think, and we're seeing this now with Instagram filmmakers or just like no names who make a video and it goes and we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. And action sports was pretty lowbrow in terms of the filmmaking style. It was the big wide lenses and DVX. It was like, it just wasn't cinematic. But because I had come from film school and had been kind of trained on the commercial side of things, I said, well, let's just treat an action sports video like we would a movie or a TV commercial. And we certainly weren't the only ones doing that, but it's one of the few that was doing that. And because we didn't know what we didn't know, we were just like, yeah, okay, well, let's go shoot this way and we'll see. And it really worked. It was really great. And just a testament to why I think a lot of the younger generation now, like, they don't know what they don't know. And so they're like, I don't need $100,000 to go shoot this thing. I'll just go do it. And if you were to ask us, hey, could you go do this thing? We're like, oh, I know how much work it's going to be, and I know how hard it's going to be, and I need this and I need that. When you don't know, you just do it. So we were, I guess, of that school of thought back then, and try to hold on to that a little bit nowadays.
Were you kind of running off on your own and making your own stuff in between jobs to kind of pick up that type of work? Or were you just saying no to other stuff until that kind of came up?
The actions.
Yeah, the action stuff.
In 2012, when I moved out here and we were doing Sweatpants Media, those were the types of jobs. They just kept getting bigger and kind of in that action sports vein. And so we just got on the train and just kept going.
In terms of the like military style videos that you're doing now, how has that kind of transitioned to that?
I just love action movies.
Right.
And so the funny thing about being a director and getting to make the kinds of things that you want, it's very challenging because you get hired for what you made yesterday. And if what you made yesterday was a wedding video, that's what people are going to see you making for them tomorrow. So it's really hard to change the course of the ship because they're not going to hire you to go make an action movie if you've only made rom-coms or, whatever. So it was just kind of slowly pushing towards that direction and shooting some stuff on my own, shooting a short, trying to say, okay, what do I want to be hired for tomorrow? And then anytime I have some creative input, can say, well, what if we tried this? What if we incorporated VFX in some capacity, or we added a stunt, and obviously still authentic to the story, but trying to look at the career and say, okay, here's where I want to go. How can I adjust what I'm doing in this tiny little way to steer the ship that way?
How did you go from doing the stuff you were doing with Sweatpants to being represented? And then I feel like I have that, like I did that series with Jay Leno and I did a whole bunch of other stuff. And I even did, like the TRD Avalon versus the Camry, promo videos. And it just never kind of like, for me, got to the next level. I got representation once, for just specifically directing. And then I think that company actually ended up going out of business. And then, it was just like one thing never led to the next. So for you, what was kind of the project or job or series of jobs that then led to, being represented by, and I guess for you, it's a production company, is that
Yeah.
And then, being on their roster and then kind of being able to go in on projects. How does that work?
Fortunately, am an extrovert. And that I say fortunately because it has helped so much. When I get done sitting at my desk or work, whatever it is, I go to an event or I go to a meeting or take some potential clients out for dinner. I always joke that I make money so that I can go entertain potential jobs. I still spend so much time going to an event of some sort or trying to provide value outside of just, hey, hire me as a vendor. And so I've found myself going to these different charity galas, and I work with an organization called the Creative Coalition and help them with as much as I can and really trying to provide value other than just being a director. And I found that walking into a conversation with what can I do for you, not what can I get from you, has really, really opened up so many more doors than just being like, hi, I'm a director. Nobody cares. There's probably 100 directors within 10 blocks of here. And eventually I got hooked up with this company, Tapestry Films, that did Wedding Crashers and Point Break and Pay It Forward. And they were at the time really interested in branded content and commercials as a way to supplement their feature and TV departments. They didn't know anything about it. An executive producer, Tim Frazier, and I went over to Tapestry and helped build their branded department. Along with that came access to feature and TV producers and directors, and there was a lot of crossover in what we were doing. And you could say it was the right place at the right time, but it was only the right place and right time because I had put myself in the potential right place, right time so many times, countless nights of that sort of thing. So that was a big shift that opened up access to all sorts of other jobs because now we could go into the room and say, the company that made Wedding Crashers is going to make your piece, or who made Point Break is going to make your piece. They really liked us because we showed up and did the work, but we really liked them because it granted access to rooms we normally couldn't walk into. So the power of partnerships and finding people that have skill sets you don't, and then kind of work together.
When you say we, are you working with the same team constantly every project? Or are you helping them mobilize a team that works for execution?
It was a little bit of both. Because we were more on the creative executive side of things, we weren't necessarily producing every job. We would send different directors and different producers out on projects, and then if some of them we did ourselves. So it was a little bit of both. I put a lot of emphasis on the team because there's too much money at stake and there's too much stress in our careers already to do it with people that you don't like. I have fun when I'm on set. I don't want to do it with a pain in the ass person. So we use a lot of the same people over and over, but there's always room for more great people. It just makes it more fun. And I think you see it on screen when you work with people that you care about and that care about you. And so then all of a sudden, this ask that if you and somebody else weren't on good terms, that little ask might not get done, or it might be a pain. But if you're all working together and you all care about each other, that little ask is met with, yes, of course, no problem, we'll figure it out. The whole lead with fear mantra from the previous generation, I just never quite understood that. And it still goes on today, of course, but I try to operate a little differently.
I feel like a lot of people that come on the podcast talk specifically about the big projects that they are working on. The big divide that it seems, even from just looking at people that are on LinkedIn, people want to hire people that are credible, that they know can return when they're spending $1 to $8 million on a project. The corporation that's hiring to do that wants them to diversify and show that they have range and that they're representing all of the different types of groups of people that are out there. Do you feel like that has had effect on what you do, and do you see it playing a role in your decision-making process?
I mean, I have been told outright that I have lost jobs for those specific reasons. And there's no reason to get upset about it. You just say, okay, well, that's fine. And there's a million reasons to lose a job. There's a million reasons to win a job. And so I think all you could do is just put your best foot forward and say, here's my vision for this thing. And it's a lightning strike, it feels like sometimes, if it's going to work or if it's not. So you just, keep pushing.
It's hard enough to get work as it is, being a reputable professional in this industry, to tack on the diversity issue, because a lot of us, we work with the same people because we need credibility and we need to be able to hire people that we can trust. And trust and diversity are on the opposite ends of the responsibility spectrum. It's really hard to be able to diversify, but then also have a team that you can count on. So it's a very interesting struggle. In terms of the projects that you're working on now, what's kind of the diverse array of work that you're working on now? You just mentioned something about in documentary you would just wrapped up or are wrapping up, and then
I've got a documentary coming out about jetpacks, the crazy world of strap a rocket to your back and go.
Really?
I am not I'm not a documentary filmmaker, and wasn't really that interested in doing the project at the start. After meeting the team and after hearing the story, I got really excited about it and said, okay, this is something that I could get fired up about doing. And I think one of the things that I also liked about it is the core team was already in place. The story was there. The funding was already there. So I didn't have to be a part of taking somebody else's project and shopping it around town to try to raise. I mean, the biggest thing for sure was that there was a story there. And then the secondary was the team was great and the funding had already been put in place. And so, I've got enough of my own scripts that I'm trying to go raise money for, that going and raising it for somebody else's project doesn't fit with how I work. So
as someone who traditionally does commercial work, what lured you into the documentary type of work?
I think what's exciting about the style of documentaries that we're seeing a little bit of now is there's a lot more scripted elements to it, and not just like the old crummy reenactments, but like actual high-end scripted scenes. And so we've got those in the doc. And so for me, it felt like it was kind of a hybrid of documentary, some narrative filmmaking, and then taking my commercial aesthetic and applying that. So it's got graphics and it's got high energy action scenes and like a sense of polish that you wouldn't get from a tiny little low budget documentary, which still can tell a good story, but just aesthetically, I wanted to be able to put my spin. And the EPs and producers were so great about saying, this is your vision here, so let's make it. Also terrifying, because when you make a commercial, I'm shooting the boards that have been given to me. I can make some adjustments and try to make it as good as possible. But sometimes you're handed boards that just aren't that exciting, and that's just, you go make that. And at the end of the day, if the spot doesn't turn out to be a real spot, it's easy to say, well, I didn't write it, and I didn't, I just went and made it. When it's your movie, you're living and dying by that sword. There's no scapegoat. Like it's all on you. And so that's been really scary. Jump in and say like, okay, I'm going to make these decisions and I have nobody to blame if they don't work. Not that you have to place blame, but like it's going to be on me if it sucks.
So there's a certain cadence in documentary versus commercial. How does that affect your work, like your approach?
The first, I over shot-listed it, over script, like in commercials, every second has to be chock full of what you need to do because it's only 30 seconds or 60 seconds. That density doesn't apply to long form. And I was at the beginning thinking very much in that like, okay, well, we're going to need to do 5 shots a minute and we have to, this scene, it was just like a totally different approach. And I had to kind of relearn a lot of that. And our first pass of the edit was quite long, but we had cut it so that all of those in-between moments, all of the breaths or the stumbles, because in commercials, you can't have that. So they were gone. And so it was just like, and we had to go back and say, well, we don't have that much shit to cover up all those cuts. And there's something real about hearing somebody stumble or say, or, look away. And that helps the audience connect with that person that you don't get with the kind of superficialness of a commercial. So it was definitely a learning curve. And I feel like I'm a much better filmmaker now, having had to go through the gauntlet of that.
With that particular documentary, are you using one camera or more than one camera?
We use 2 cameras, sometimes 3.
What's kind of the time frame on something like that compared to a commercial?
Time frame on a commercial, usually it's like a couple of weeks to prep, a few days to shoot, and then 3 or 4 weeks for post. So call it 3 months max. The documentary has been going on since last March, so we're almost on 2 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And that felt insane. If you would have told me that at the beginning, that would be insane. And I would have said, no way, I can do it in a third of that time. But there's just so many things that are out of your control. Like somebody gets hurt or the subject has to go to Dubai and you can't shoot with them for 6 weeks. And like stuff you just can't get around. And then just the sheer volume of content for post. It's just, yeah. And trying things and crafting the story. So yeah, it was much longer than I thought.
You executed Paris Hilton's Electrify commercial, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of walk me through that as like what your process is like in terms of when it first came about, executing the project, post, and then final deliverables.
Paris Hilton Electrify was the 4th fragrance that we did with her.
Really?
So we were wrapping the 3rd one, and in the parking lot, she said, oh, I've got this other one that's coming out soon. We should probably talk about that. I'm like, yeah, okay, great. So it was one of those things that kind of fell in my lap, but off of the back of doing three others. So
she came to you directly for that. So what's kind of the process for developing what that looks like, the shot list, and then obviously she is the client. I'm assuming she is the client unless there's
the way that it works with her fragrance and with many of the celebrity fragrances is that there's an actual fragrance company that makes the perfume, and then it's either a licensing deal or somehow there's a partnership with the fragrance company and the talent, and then they design it and market it. And so our client was obviously Paris, but also Parlux, which is the company that manufactured it. The EP on the project had the relationship with the fragrance company and with Paris personally. And so when they were talking about it, my name came up and they said, okay, let's do that.
Maybe you can walk me through, like, with the production company, the budget, in terms of creative, how that works. Are they letting you kind of do your thing, or do they come with you with a set idea or a few objectives? What's kind of how does that process work for you?
It was a really collaborative process and fun that it started with, here's the overall objective and the demo and the tone. What do we do? Like, I really like that. And I tell creative directors all the time, you don't have to pay me, but if you're thinking about a campaign and you want my perspective, how could you do it? How could you translate what's in your head to on screen? Like, I love that stuff. So this was a good example of, we don't know what's going to work on screen, but we know what our goal is. And then we kind of collaborate to get there. Taylor Gittin, who was the executive producer, had a relationship with both Paris and with the fragrance company. So they were looking for a director to create these new campaigns for her different fragrance lines. When I came on board, they said, here's the overall tone, here's the overall kind of idea, but we don't know how that translates on screen. Then producers and I went back and just banged our heads against the wall, came up with a couple of different directions. Then Paris and the team, we all talked about what was working, what was accomplishing what they wanted. We picked one, refined it, and then that's what I then created the shot list out of. Paris is the best. She's so great. She works hard. She shows up on time. She's got a good attitude. I can't say enough. Even her rider's not that ridiculous. It's like a couple of bottles of champagne and it was fine. It was great. And so when we finished shooting, there was a lot of trust, and I said, okay, let's see where this goes. And post was pretty mellow. We had a couple of rounds, but nothing out of the ordinary. And the VFX took a little bit of time, but like not anything out of the ordinary either. So all in all, it was like boring in a good way, that we did it, and there wasn't a lot of conflict or drama. So
how do you kind of decide the look of what it's going to finally look like? Are you doing that? Is that kind of like the process, or do you have a still image or a set of inspiration that you're kind of pulling from? What kind of?
I probably over prep, but if I don't get to set and I can't see it in my head, if I haven't already cut it, then I feel really out of my depth. I already know what it's going to look like, to the point of like, okay, well, we can't shoot this way. Well, we're going to shoot that way. Like, I have to recut it in my head before we can do it. That comes just with a silly amount of prep and mood boards. And I work with the cinematographer on what is the look. And we're pulling still frames of movies or TV shows that we like, or other commercials, kind of defining the look that way, so that when we get to set and my overly ambitious shot list is staring us in the face, there's very little time or need for adjustments outside of what we've already planned on doing. There's no like figuring it out on the day. And I know that some directors like that style, and that's good for them, but I can't figure it out on the day. I figured it out a week prior and just executing the blueprint. So
how does that compare to like the Kia commercial that you did? You recently just did one that was kind of international, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I went to New Zealand like maybe a week ahead of time and worked with the team every day, scouting and refining and all of the prep work there. So the New Zealand crews are so good. I love those guys. They are every bit as professional as what you'd expect from a Hollywood crew. You get plopped in another country and you don't quite know what to expect, but I knew those guys and the team at Real Factory and loved them. And so it was a good process. That one too was like surprisingly boring in a good way. We made our days and we got more than what we needed. So yeah, so it was good.
That was a national spot, is that correct?
Right-hand side drive car. And so it was the content for the right-hand side drive countries. And so we won't get it here.
Automotive, what's kind of is your process any different in terms of how you approach that, since it's more about the vehicle rather than, I guess, the people in that respect?
I think with automotive, the there still is a character, and we still have to make the audience fall in love with that character, whether it's a person or a car. Just trying to use the same principles that we would with shooting a person, use that shooting a car, whether you're short side framing the car, or shooting it from a low angle to make it look tough, or shooting it from a high angle to, like, we're still using the same principles, just with a car instead of a person.
Are you doing just commercial, or is there social and stills? How's kind of production been for you in terms of all the platforms that you're creating content for?
Kia was just specifically commercial and social. So we didn't have any stills on that one, but it's not up to me. If it was, we would have, because the car looked great and we had all of the lights and everything out there. So, it could have made sense to have photo, but they had their own campaign for that. So
with like Paris Hilton and Visa and Cloud9, through all those things, are you, specifically this year and probably the year before, are you being asked to create social stills and the commercial all at the same time, or what's kind of the ask been for most of the projects?
So for the Anheuser-Busch Montejo project, we did the pre-roll ad. We did a bunch of social stuff using the influencers, and they did a live event, did a nonprofit event at the Dodger Stadium. So there was a ton. It was a big web of content that was getting created. We did all the print and out-of-home and all of that stuff too. And it was really fun to get to be a part of that creative process from the beginning, because then we knew this is where the content is going. So we'll shoot it a little bit differently, or we just know the whole story world better. And just knowing more about it up front helped us create better stuff, because we knew we had to shoot so much for all the different platforms. So that agency, the Creative Bar, did a really good job at tying all of those things in from the beginning. And we were fortunate to work with them very early on a lot of that stuff. And then they got great influencer talent too.
So with the work that you're doing now, how has AI made its way into your process?
The AI question, yes. We've been using AI for mood boards and for helping kind of convey a concept, especially if it's a VFX-driven thing or something that's kind of surreal and wacky. AI has been good for helping with that. AI stuff still takes a really long time. You see these spots that come out and like, oh, it was generated all with AI. Yeah, but you probably still spent as much time, and prompt engineers and these designers that are doing it are still expensive. It's not click a button and all of a sudden it spits out what you want. So it is proving even more so to just be a tool rather than a replacement. And the backlash, every time somebody releases an AI commercial, it gets press, but it's primarily negative press. So I know that agencies and clients are looking at it as a way to cut costs and possibly some staff. And I know that production is looking at it as taking our jobs. I think that it's probably going to land somewhere in the middle of all of that. I can't see into the future. I don't know, but it is a little bit of a scary thing, but I don't see it as completely doom and gloom. But I'm not looking at it as like a replacement. I feel like it has its purpose, but it's going to be hard to really replace the human touch and this human soulness of things. Like with all sorts of things, the pendulum is going to swing one way, and then people are going to reject it, and then the pendulum will swing back. It's like with film. If I could shoot 35 exclusively, I would. Digital has come a long way and it looks incredible, but like there's still something about the filmness. I think film will die when we stop trying to replicate it with digital. And I think AI will be similar, that AI will try to replicate real, and real will never go away until AI no longer is attempting to replicate real.
There's some discussion currently, and there's a lot of changes that are happening this year in terms of agency consolidation. You have Honda and Nissan probably merging this year as well. I know a lot of people have had challenges in terms of getting work. How has work been for you in terms of, there's always the more for less question, but in terms of production wise, has it changed at all for you?
This year certainly has been slower than other years. And I could go on a whole doom and gloom rant, but I feel like it's only going to put everybody in a bad mood, me included. So I really have tried to just say, you know what, it was a slower year. The industry as a whole seems to be moving in the wrong direction for what we do, but all we can do is just keep trying and keep looking at like, okay, well, making the documentary, or like, what does long form look like, or where are the other ways that we can still try to keep making stuff and keep being creative. I think that there are plenty of other ways to do it. Again, trying to just offer value outside of just being a blank. There's always room for value. And so I just try to focus on what is the most value I can provide. I try to look at what are the assets that I have. And that could be anything from like access to a lot of talent, because I've worked with a lot of celebrities or know a lot of managers and agents. And so like, okay, if you need to get to so-and-so, there's a chance that I might be able to help with that. And so I'm not just a director, but I'm a director plus this, plus that. I'm nervous like everybody is nervous. I think if we focus on providing real value outside of just being the vendor, then there's always room for somebody who provides extra value or provides something that is a bit more intangible.
Do you feel like you're in the middle of an evolution, or that you're in a hurry up and wait scenario?
I think that we're in the middle of it. When you kind of zoom out to the macro of the industry or to our individual careers, I don't think that there can be a hurry up and wait. I think you have to always be pushing forward and always evolving, because if we're sitting around waiting, like, somebody else isn't. Somebody else is staying up later, waking up earlier, going to more events, making their personal projects. Like, somebody else is always on the hunt for your job. And I think the higher up the food chain you go, the more people are gunning for so the higher up you go, the harder you have to work.
Cool. I think that takes us into the 10 questions.
It's time for
10 questions. Is that a yes or no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
You've described yourself as a storyverse architect. Can you break down what that means and how it shapes your approach to storytelling?
Storyverse architect to me means that you're building a story world, whether that's for a truck or a character or whatever it is. You're building an entire story world that the audience can exist in. It's more than just one piece of content. It's not make a TV commercial and then do cut downs. It's saying, we know that audiences consume media differently depending on what platform. You wouldn't put the same thing on Twitter that you would in a newsletter or on a TV spot. So how do we create a kind of a universe of content so that the audience can say, oh, I saw this thing in the newsletter and I'm actively going to migrate to Twitter or to Instagram or whatever to see the next piece and the next piece. And so I think Storyverse Architect is building that. It's a strategy and creative fusion. Oftentimes we see strategy as one pillar, creative as another. Sometimes they battle, sometimes they work together. But I think the Storyverse Architect is kind of at the intersection of that, because it's looking at both feeding each other. The strategy feeds why we focus on certain creative, and the creative of what world we're building drives the strategy that we use. So I think it's a give and take, a more collaborative approach.
Breaking up parts of the story across different platforms, or are you saying it's kind of the opposite? That where it's kind of all the horizontal avenues are then reinforcing the same story?
A little bit of both. So I think when we design a story world, we kind of look at it like a wheel. So at the center is the foundational narrative, and that's like the center of the wheel. And then all of the spokes that come out of that are the different, what we call nodes, and that's different types of content. Those nodes send the audience to different platforms, to different pieces of content, all while reinforcing that center hub. And that's kind of the most concise way that we've come to define that. An example, for instance, for the Cloud9ers project, we didn't want to just create an NFT or a Web3. That was just one component of it. We wanted to say, okay, well, we built this story world, and so we had this mysterious, anonymous, fictitious character, and everything was this character's vision of the world. So you weren't just buying an NFT or getting involved in the feature storyline. You were really getting excited about this character and where and what they were going to do next. And then, oh, by the way, there are these other things and other ways to interact, and gamification, platform migration for the audiences, all those different ways to try to get people sucked into that world, and then they feel like they're participating because they've chosen to go to the next platform, and now they're invested in this storyline. And that principle could be applied to any product or movie or television show, that sort of thing.
You've worked with some major brands like Mercedes-Benz, McDonald's, and Paris Hilton's Electrify fragrance. How do you balance creative freedom with the brand's expectations?
I always try to find a reason to love the project. Even if it's something that I'm not terribly excited about, I still have to go in and say, okay, well, I don't like 50% of this, but I love this other 50%. So then I can still stay kind of creatively fulfilled, knowing that there is some piece of this that I care about. And at the end of the day, the only reason I get to do what I get to do is because there is a client who pays me to get to do this job. So at the end of the day, we still owe it to them to really deliver. But creatively, I think if I can find a little something that I love, it keeps me going.
What's the craziest or most ambitious idea you've brought to life, and how did you make that happen?
I would say we did this, Tim Fraser and I created this short film. It's based on a Reddit writing prompt where it exists in a world where when you lie, you get a scar on your body. Big lie, big scar, little lie, little scar. So the film and the whole story world is based on this: don't judge a book by its cover. Just because you appear a certain way on the outside doesn't mean that's who you really are on the inside. We got the rights to the viral prompt, and then we went and raised a little bit of money, and then we hired a writer, and then we ended up shooting it, and we built hundreds of pieces of content, all the way down to there's like a secret website that if you're paying attention during the film and you see the URL, you can go and you can follow that character's storyline deeper down the rabbit hole. Naively, we're like, it's a short film. Like, we could do that. Oh, and we like this form of storytelling. We could do that. It was so difficult. And we shot over 4 days, which was about half as much, but we didn't have much money. And so it was like we dug our hole little by little, not realizing that we were digging ourselves in this hole. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh shit, we have put ourselves in this no going back situation. And like, there's nothing that we can do other than figure it out because we've bitten off, more than we could chew. But again, had we known that it was going to be that ridiculous, we just wouldn't have done it. And then it wouldn't exist.
Poresight's a bitch.
Yeah.
Your NFT project, Experience Life on Cloud9, has won a Platinum Muse Award. What inspired the concept, and how do you see NFTs shaping storytelling in the future?
Well, the NFT project, the NFT was just a part of it. We really wanted to say, okay, let's build some IP that could be a TV show or a movie, and let's use Web3 and the NFT craze as a way to generate an audience and build some buzz in that unique way. Because it was our own world, we didn't have a real client that we had to owe anything to. We got to just build it ourselves. And so the theme of it was this idea of finding a place where even if you're a little weird, you can be accepted. That was kind of the core theme of it. We created this character that is Satoshi Nakamoto's second or third cousin. We don't know. And so it's very tongue-in-cheek, very like Ryan Reynolds sarcastic tone. We don't know who Satoshi is, so clearly we don't know who his second or third cousin is. So that kind of ridiculousness of this benevolent billionaire, his second or third cousin, creating this world where, people got to go and experience unique things that they normally wouldn't get to do. So we said, all right, what else? Said, okay, well, we know a lot of brands and we know a lot of things. Like, let's tie experiences to the NFTs. So when you purchase one, you're actually getting more than just a JPEG. And so if you were to purchase some, that would unlock being able to go whale shark diving in Mexico or fly in a fighter jet. And so we had all of these different levels of real world experiences that were tied to this NFT, all serving this narrative and this bigger vision that could go into TV show feature film IP. That one's tough to talk about in a short period of time because there's just so much. I mean, we had a whole spreadsheet of content and the platform, and like my brain would go numb looking at that, just thinking about like hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content.
So people are able to go, people are buying experiences, right? Their adventures kind of interesting.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, you remember when we were kids and you'd get the coupon book and you'd pay $50 and it had $250 worth of coupons in it. Same kind of principle.
You've been involved in a variety of mediums, film, branded campaigns, even experiential. How do you decide which medium is best for a specific story?
I mean, the short answer is oftentimes it's dictated already before we get involved, because there's no really right place to start. Some creative objectives require, or some strategic objectives require creative that starts with an experiential or a PR stunt, and others are top of funnel TV spots. So I wish that I had more input on that, but
with respect to that, what's been the most successful version of one of those?
The most successful version is where we are in the customer journey, and like identifying that, and then really leaning into, well, what does a customer at that stage of the journey care about, and how active are they going to be in migrating from platform to platform? I think the further you go down the journey, I think more likely they'll jump from platform to platform, just trying to identify that, and sometimes the strategic input is welcomed and they say, okay, well, that's a good idea. We didn't think about it that way. And sometimes they say, shut up and just go make it. And so we say, yes, of course.
As someone who thrives on innovation, how do you stay ahead of the curve in such a fast changing industry?
The innovation stuff has always been really exciting. When we see that some new tech is coming out, have found ways to get involved really early by, I mean, as silly as it sounds, just like cold calling the company and saying, hey, you guys need marketing material. You've got this new thing. Let's figure out how to pull it together and make something. I have been so fired up about VR and AR for a long time, and we're still not quite there, but I still think that we can move in that direction. And the LED walls, I love that. So the short answer is I try to identify where I think, and I'm not always right, where I think it's going, and then go and partner with the companies who are making that tech, because they most of the time are smaller companies. And so they need marketing materials, they need content, they need to tell a story. And oftentimes these small companies are overwhelmed because they're trying to develop a product, rightfully so. And so I've had good success with saying, hey, let me help you with the storytelling side of things. And you usually get a big like sigh of relief, say, oh, great, yes. And then that allows me access to this new tech that other people don't have access to, or I get it, at a discount or for free. And then start pulling together all the partners and put the puzzle together of, okay, we have one piece of the puzzle, which is a free LED wall. Great. Now we know, the guys over at Light Gear, let's call them because they need to market their lights. And now we know the guys over at Red, let's get their new camera over here, and start to cobble together those pieces and then say, all right, that's enough to say, hey, brand XYZ or big writer that shouldn't take my phone call, will you come write this thing? And just trying to build as much of a package of stuff. And then usually when it's, exciting new tech, people are pretty fired up about getting involved. So.
Yeah, I mean, I already feel left out. Well, I haven't even done anything. You directed Paris Hilton's fragrance commercial. What's it like working with such an iconic figure?
There are a lot of personalities, and especially with celebrities, and I have been fortunate to work with great ones and some not so great ones. I would count Paris as one of the top that I have gotten to work with, just because she's so sweet and works hard and really cares. It shows up on time, and so and is just a good person and really smart. I think that she has gotten that bad rap from, the Simple Life times, right? I mean, her fragrance company is a monster globally. And that's just one piece of her global empire. So I think she deserves more respect than she gets, because she's really built something special and really elevated her name to a global brand. So it's inspiring to be around those kinds of people. They think in different ways. And so I try to just pick up as much as I can.
What's been your proudest moment as a creator so far, and why does it stand out for you?
How about some of the craziest moments that have made me say why I do this? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because the proudest thing is tough. Some of the moments where I feel like the dream is a reality have been the crazy moments of flying down the Las Vegas Strip, filming a Lamborghini racing down a closed strip with the cop cars, closing down each road and ripping around the corner and seeing the lights go on and then seeing the Lambo just I mean, like, holy shit, we've closed down the Las Vegas Strip. This is not real. So it's moments like that, or hanging out of a helicopter chasing a race car down the street. Or for the Cloud9ers, we were driving down in the camera car. We were driving down the Kennedy Spaceway runway. It's the longest, flattest runway in the world. It's where the shuttle takes off. And we had access to that. And we were racing a Porsche and a private jet down the runway and chasing with in a camera car. It wasn't for us, but the NASA helicopters were there, and it just felt like the coolest thing. Like, how is this my life? How do I get to do this? So there's moments like that. Or we were in Taiwan and we had a day off, and we had hiked up into this little village, and it was a really long walk, but we had gone so deep outside of Taipei up into the mountains, and we came across this little Chinese village, and it was just breathtaking. It looked like what we make Chinatown look like. And so you're looking at it and you're thinking like, oh yeah, I'm in Chinatown. Like, no, this is the real thing that we replicate. And just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing in the middle of the mountains? And like, how is that my job? And so stuff like that, where you just find yourself in positions that you think, what did I do right to get here? Makes the hard parts worth it.
With your first documentary wrapping up, what's been the biggest challenge or lesson from diving into long-form storytelling?
Long form, it's easy to get ambitious, and because it takes a long time. So I wasn't thinking about how long it was going to get drawn out, and just the stamina that it takes to stay with a project and love it all the way to the end, especially coming from commercials where the timeline is so short and you're just on to the next thing. With the long form, you have to really stick with it and really say, okay, I don't want to do this today, but it doesn't matter, I have to. So I think that the biggest takeaway was just like practice that stamina. And if you're going to dive into a long form thing, make sure that you're going to love it even on the bad days.
What's been the hardest thing you've had to do that maybe even you thought wasn't going to work, but came out better than expected? Because I know it's happened a lot where your client asks things and you're like,
Yeah.
either you don't have the money or the location isn't right, or like, shit isn't working, and it's like, if we pull this off, it'll be a miracle.
Yeah.
I feel like every job's like that, but
Yeah, right. What's the worst one? One of the hardest things that I had worked on was Deadly Illusions, and it's a feature film starring Christian Davis and Dermot Mulroney. It's out on Netflix now. It was just a lot of days and hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent every day over a long period of time. Realizing that the schedule wasn't going to work. It just wasn't possible. I was only supposed to be there for a couple of days to do the stunts and the second unit work. And we got a couple of days in, and we were looking at the schedule, and we're just, this isn't possible. There's no way. And so we had to kind of create a larger second unit, and I stayed for 2 more weeks to shoot a bunch of the scenes because there was no way to do it any other way. And none of that had been built into the original budget, but credit to the producers for figuring it out, because I had this small unit, and I woke up every day getting the pages of what I had to shoot and thinking like, every day was, I don't know if I can do this, and what's going to go wrong that's going to derail this plan, and we have to figure out how to pivot and adjust. I kind of think about it as like the third quarter where you are just like, I don't know. The end of the game is so far away at this point. I don't know how I can possibly get there. And that's what it felt like every day, waking up and being thrown into that gauntlet. And you've got celebrity talent, you've got a huge crew, you've got there's so much pressure. It worked, but I don't know how. I mean, it was a testament to the team that showed up and just put the trust in everybody and said, okay, well, we're going to just keep going and we're going to do it.
How much of team sets the tone for like your morale or your confidence going into a project? Is that a big part of it, or is that something where you feel like no matter who it is, I can kind of mold and work with whoever?
I think it's a big deal, and part of why I'm really selective by who I choose from the start. And that goes with casting too. I think when I'm looking at casting, I think, okay, well, obviously, can they do it? Do they have it? But then also, am I going to be able to work with this person when the sun's going down and we've got 5 minutes to do this and there's no world where we should be able to get it? Are they going to be in the right headspace to say, yes, it's you and me, let's go? And I think so the team, I think, is the majority of it, putting the right people in place at the beginning and then getting out of their way, letting them be good at their job.
10 questions.
Or is there anything you would tell your younger self knowing what you know now?
Yeah, tons and tons of stuff. I think, I think I look at myself back 10 years ago and I think, boy, that guy's an idiot. And I'm sure in 10 years from now, I will look at myself and say, that guy's an idiot. So maybe just saying to my younger self, keep the confidence and keep that undying faith that things are going to work out. Try to better harness that and say negative attitudes and I can't only manifest that. And so those times when you just said, "Ugh, I don't want to do this. I'm not gonna go to this event, or I don't want to take this job, or I don't want to do that thing." I think maybe more say yes more, and be a bit riskier with things, because when no wife and kids, so like take those risks and really jump in and do it.
What advice would you have for someone trying to get into being a director?
If you haven't gone to college yet, my advice would be go to business school or marketing, and then minor in film or intern in the summers on a set or at a production company, and really learn that side of it, because they don't teach you those things in film school. Film school is very good with the art of it, and we have to have that. But if you're the greatest artist in the world and nobody ever sees your stuff, difficult to keep doing your art. So learn marketing, learn management, business management, and leadership, I think, are the most important things. And then in addition to that, or if you have already gone to college, go get jobs as editors. As an editor, I think that there's a ton of work out there for editors. Most of it doesn't pay very well if you're just starting out. That's okay. Those are your dues that you have to pay. I mean, I worked for years for $1 an hour, because you just have to do it. You have to build the relationships and learn the skills. And I think when you're an editor, you will scream at the computer and you'll scream at the director whose piece you're cutting because they didn't get this close up, or they didn't get the wide, or they didn't get an establishing shot. You'll now know, when I go into the field, I have to do all of those things. So I think that's a big deal. And then go to acting class. It is a ton of fun, and you can audit the class. I've done it for years, and I think I'm an infinitely better director because I've done it to understand the actor's process and who they are and how they work. So you can talk to them differently. You can meet them where they are, rather than forcing them to do something that they're not maybe capable of. I'm giving away all the secrets. Everybody already wants my job.
Nobody has the network yet. Where can people find you? With that said, where was the best place to be able to see your work and connect with you?
Say my website, just my name, jonnyzeller.com is a good place to check. Otherwise, on the social channels, I don't post very often. I'm terrible at it, but sometimes so.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for coming out. Thank you for your time. Thank you for eating a donut.
Yeah, I loved it.
And yeah, man, that's a wrap.
Just fix it in post.